Good evening. Hello. Hello, Sir Cute. Hello, Hugs. Hello, hello. Whatever this emote conveys, I don't know. Eyes pink heart shape. It would have done. It would look fine if it didn't have the dots in the eyes. But it does, and I feel like that makes it look concerning. But yeah, hello, good evening, good whatever this emote. That's how I feel when I'm being subjected to watch cringe, and I'm sitting there like, oh god, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? That's the emotion I feel when I feel like I see that emote. I feel like that's what it's conveying. Like that it's so bad but you can't look away. It's like it's a car crash that you just have to watch. You ever see the episode of Community where they focus on a mascot that no one could be offended by and they get the Greendale human being? I think that they may have happened at YouTube. I have not watched any episodes of Community, but I think I can understand the concept that you are trying to get across. Yeah, hold on, I can't really see the emotes very well. My OBS doesn't have a chat box. OBS doesn't let you chat in your own chat on YouTube. You are a witness, and a witness only. The show. Oh wait. Is this Pog? Where's the send button? Is that Pog? Apparently it's meant to be whistling, but I think it looks like a Pog. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know who designed these. I think it's a cat calling him. Oh no. Oh no. Yeah, maybe one day. I mean, Twitch, if I remember correctly, Twitch is making it so you can use follower emotes in other channels if you're subscribed to them, which I think is a good bonus. And yet YouTube is out here, like, yeah, even if you're a member of someone's chat, you can only use emotes in their chat and nowhere else. And I think that's stupid. I think that's dumb. I wanna use I mean I only have membership in one channel, but that's fine. That's all I need. YouTube give us this grace. Yeah. Yeah, I don't need emotes from other YouTube channels when I have Goat. Goat Squad. I don't want the poop emote. I'm good. I'm good without that, actually, I think. I will give them credit. I'm a big fan of this. Where's my send button? I'm a big fan of this. It's a cat in a box. That's me. That's a picture of me. Either way. Anyway. I like the space. Yeah, they really did. They really did just they stole space. Chill. Oh my god, there's two box cat emotes. Oh my god, that's two more than Twitch have. I have no idea what emotion they're conveying, but they are there. Oh my god. YouTube. Right. Anyway, I think I missed last week's stream on Thursday. Was it last week or was it the week before? I can't remember. Either way, I missed a week. We still have more of the story of Tomoda and Matsunaga to go through. Hopefully the rest of this book is not going to include any prostitution. I would like to stop. Hold on. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. I don't think I want to read this one anymore, guys. I don't think I want to read this one anymore. I just flicked to a random page a few pages ahead of where I am to read. Do I even want to? Do I even want to? No. I... Okay. I'm gonna keep on. I can't believe Purity is slipping right when it gets to the good. No, God. I don't want to read about prostitution anymore. It's cause, right, so this story is about the difference between the sensible and family and non-sinful Japanese cultures and the gluttonous, lustful indulgence of the West. That's kind of what this story is supposed to be about. And is it though? That's apparently the concepts that it's trying to convey, according to a thing I read. So because Tomoda is supposed to represent like the West and the indulgences he is engaging in as Tomoda. And being very stout and drinking a lot and taking photos of girls and yeah. Okay, I'm gonna carry on trying to read, but if I get uncomfortable, please forgive me if I stop. Good grief. All right. Usual. Not only will I forgive you, I'll be actively proud. Why proud? Purity didn't want to do a thing anymore. Real. But yeah, normal reading stuff. I will catch up with chat at the end of each chapter. So feel free to talk. What else do I normally say? Oh yeah, if I need to adjust the volume at any time, if the music is too loud or too quiet, I can adjust it. If my mic is too loud or too quiet, I can I can adjust it if it's too loud. I can't make it any louder. It's at maximum volume. I mean, I guess I could try and like move closer, but that would mean it would be hard to read the book. That'd be like Purity smacking their head into microphone distance. And trust me, I'm already all I have to do is like lean my head forward, and I can absolutely headbutt the shit out of this microphone. And I'm not going to, because that's bad. But alright. Let's do this. Let us continue with chapter 4 of the story of Gotamote headbutting real. Was it rams? I think both of them headbutt shit. Because it'd have to be a ram. I guess goats are more known for eating everything, than a ram is known for headbutting things. But I think they both headbutt things. If I had horns, I'd probably headbutt stuff too. But of all the things I do have, I do not have horns. Alright. Let me just click on my YouTube music stuff so that it doesn't try and mute partway in the stream. Chapter 4. What became of Tomoda Ginzo after that? I know nothing of what happened next. From that night on, Tomoda stopped coming to number 27, and the house itself closed down soon after. The same thing had happened in 1915, the last time he disappeared. His lair back then had been number 10, and this too was abandoned not long after he went missing. It could mean only one thing. Tomoda had entered his third period of obscurity. It remained to be seen whether his disappearance had anything to do with Matsunaga Gisuke. Nothing of note happened for nearly a year. In October 1921, I received word from Shigeko informing me that her husband had returned to the family home in Yagyu. As on the previous occasions, he had been away a little over 4 years. The joy the family felt to see him home again, the happy reunion of parent and child, husband and wife, all this and more was described at length in Shigeko's letter. I will leave the details to the reader's imagination. One thing I ought to mention concerns the daughter, Taeko, who had been so desperate to see her father. According to the letter, she had begun to shake off her illness soon after he came home, and was now well on her way to a full recovery. One happy event followed another for the Matsunaga family. Shigeko continued to write from time to time to inform me of Matsunaga's progress. I was the only person in whom she could confide about her husband's puzzling behaviour. Her letters gave me a glimpse of what the kind of life he was living back in the country. It was clear that he had returned in much the same fashion as before. He had appeared without warning late one afternoon, dressed in Japanese attire, a single travel bag in his hand, looking exhausted and thin. He said nothing of where he had spent the last 4 years. He doted on his family and was given to tearful outbursts. Shigeko had promptly confirmed that the familiar items, the postcard, the photographs, the seal and the amethyst ring, were still in their usual place inside the bag. For the life of me, I cannot think why he still holds on to these things, she wrote in one of her letters. Perhaps if I sent the photographs and ring to you, you might be able to tell me once and for all whether they are the same items you have seen in Mr. Tomoda's possession. You must think it is absurd for me to persist in my superstitions now that my husband has come home. But how can I be sure that he will not leave again in another 3 or 4 years? If only I knew one way or the other. I sometimes look at the photographs you were good enough to send. Often the differences are so striking it seems ludicrous to suspect they could be the same person. Mr. Tomoda is so much younger looking than my husband, and my husband is so frail and thin. At other times, though, I feel almost convinced that the similarities between them are real, and I have become more suspicious than ever. It was early in the following year, towards the end of March 1922, that I took a trip to Kyoto and Nara. I had been in my hotel for several days when the letter arrived from Shigeko, who had seen an article in one of the papers that mentioned where I was staying. I understand you will be spending some time in Nara, which is only a few miles away from us here. I would be so happy if we could meet. Yagyu is on the way to Tsukigase as you come from Kasagi Station on the Kansai line. You may have heard of the famous plum blossoms at Tsukigase, which are at their best just now. If you came to see the blossoms, you would almost certainly pass through the village on your way. Would you take the time to stop by and give me a chance to thank you in person for all your help over the past 2 years? Also, I should very much like for you to meet my husband. It is selfish of me, I know, but I can't help wondering whether the mystery that has troubled me for so long might not be solved once and for all if you were to see my husband with your own eyes. He knows that I have written to you, but has never pressed me for details. I told him I wrote to say how much I had enjoyed your books. He seemed happy to hear that I was able to find some solace in your work while he was away. My curiosity piqued. I decided to pay her a visit at once, more for the sake of getting a glimpse of Matsunaga Gisuke than because I was interested in the famous blossoms. I left Nara at 8 the next morning. Kasagi was the 3rd station on the line. A bus ran from the station to Tsukigase, but it was no weather for sitting cooped up in a bus. Under a clear blue sky, I set out on foot along the road that led the 2 or 3 miles to the village of Yagyu. Several motor cars wheezed past as I walked, full of people on their way to see the blossoms. Clouds of dust kicked up by the passing buses sullied the clear air and spoilt the view a little, but I knew as soon as I started out that I had made the right decision. It is difficult to convey a sense of the happiness I felt as I walked through the Yamato countryside that spring day, but anyone who has had a similar experience will understand what I felt. The sense of well-being that was mine as I wound my way slowly along the path. The road I walked must have been the prefectural road that passes through Tsukigase to Iga no Ueno. Yoshino aside, Yamato is a flat country, with almost no real mountains or deep secluded valleys. Bright, almost white roads crisscross the terrain, linking scattered villages, crossing streams and skirting sloping hillsides. At first glance, it is some of the most ordinary-looking scenery in the world. But those peaceful, unpretentious fields were just made to be looked at on a spring day like this. There was beauty in everything, even in the most commonplace things. In the walls of the earthen storehouses off in the distance, in the thatched roofs, in the trees that lined the roads, in the paddy fields and bamboo groves. Everything danced before my eyes in the sunlight. My spirits soared. I had on a thick winter coat, and sweat soaked the back of my shirt as I walked. From time to time I stopped to admire the view. Somewhere in the distance a reddish mist floated across the foothills. Birds twittered ceaselessly as they flitted by overhead. I had wandered into a painting of the idyllic village. The legends of the peach blossom spring must have been inspired by scenery like this, I thought. Sloping fields planted with tea stretched all around. The hillsides swelled, rising and falling in gentle feminine curves. The rows of tea plants glowing like velvet jewels in the sunlight. How magical it all looked. I quite forgot the purpose that had brought me here. I felt I could walk these hillsides all day without a hint of tiredness. Yagyu turned out to be bigger than I had expected, and I still had a fair distance to cover after I entered the village. But I knew the Matsunaga house was an old one, and I recognized it as soon as I saw it. Before I had even sent in my card, Shigeko herself was at the gates to meet me. She had been standing in the garden waiting. A girl of 3 or 4 toddled behind her. This was her second daughter, Fumiko, who had been born in August 1919. "It's such a nice day. I just had a feeling you might pop by. What glorious weather." She looked much like her photograph, with her long hair done up in an old-fashioned chignon, but with her cheeks blushing in the sunlight. she looked at least a couple years younger than 35. As I had expected, she was well spoken and wore a simple silk kimono that suited her well. The Matsunaga residence was a dark old house, more or less unchanged from the way it must have looked in the mid-19th century, when it would have been home to a prosperous local farmer. Shigeko led me into the parlor. "My husband will be down in a few moments," she said. We chatted comfortably while we waited. I began by asking her about her elegant handwriting, which had made such an impression on me when I received her first letter. Her formal education, she said, had ended after she graduated from a girls' school in Nara, but she had continued to read and practice calligraphy in her spare time after marrying into the Matsunaga family. I learned that her husband was a descendant of Matsunaga Hisahide, a samurai who had risen to prominence during the civil wars of the Middle Ages. The family had lived here for nearly 400 years. The traditional script and style of her letters owed more to family tradition than her own personal preference, she said. She told me that in their early days together, before his mother died, Matsunaga used to rail against the family's old-fashioned ways. The time-worn customs had continued even after his mother's death, and for a while she wondered whether this was what had driven him away. But over the past decade, his tastes had changed. He was much mellower now. Nothing pleased him more than to see his wife studying waka poetry and reading the classics. Recently, he had taken to setting her assignments, handing her verses from the Lotus Sutra to copy as calligraphy practice. He had apparently developed a taste for the Chinese classics himself, and often disappeared into the storehouse to rummage through a collection of texts that dated back to his grandfather's days. "He's getting better all the time," she said when I asked about her husband's health, "but he's not fully fit. He's been talking about another pilgrimage to the 33 Canon this spring. It did wonders for him the last time we went." His weight was down to just 90 pounds. He had a weak stomach and rarely ate more than one meal a day. He almost never drank alcohol and took great care over his health. In spite of his weak constitution, he had never been seriously ill. She didn't seem too worried about him. Indeed, she said, people of his type were often the ones who lived to a ripe old age. And Taiko, thankfully, had made a full recovery since her father's return. She was living with relatives in Nara and studying at a girls' school there. Shigeko seemed just like any other happy wife and mother as she responded quietly to my questions. She was much more relaxed and forthcoming than I would have expected from her letters. If she could only be assured that her husband was home to stay this time, there was no reason why she shouldn't live a quiet and peaceful life here, in this beautiful village, her days as free as from clouds as the spring skies outside. She was less flustered than I had expected when I mentioned the travel bag. "I wish you could see it, but there's no way I could bring it out while he's here," she said. Instead, she gave me a detailed description and told me everything she could remember about the shape of the bag and the design of the amethyst ring. It was impossible to be certain without seeing it myself, but everything she said made it sound like a perfect match for the ring I knew so well. As we talked, there came the mournful sound of an invalid's unsteady shuffling in the corridor outside, and the master of the house entered the room at last. A look of embarrassment crossed his face as our eyes met. He would be 42 this year, but he looked nearer 50. Thick wrinkles covered his neck and forehead. His hair was greying, his temples already white. His prominent Adam's apple quivered whenever he spoke. In fact, every bone in his body seemed to shake. He looked like a shriveled tree draped with a kimono, or a puppet whose springs had become tangled and were in danger of snapping at any moment, sending him crashing to the floor in pieces. Poor Gisuke seemed to share such fears himself. He moved warily, as if his body were a fragile porcelain jar. Even after he sat down, he had to lean a hand on the tatami to support his unsteady torso. Any second now, I thought. He's going to totter over or have a dizzy spell and fall flat on his back. Clearly, he was still reeling from the effects of what must have been a severe nervous breakdown. Even the sharpness in his eyes I had noticed in his photograph now looked like a symptom of his illness. They were the eyes of a brooding misanthrope, or a man haunted by obsessive thoughts. Nothing in his appearance reminded me of Tomoda. The sharp, sallow face with its bristly whiskers, the croaking voice that emerged on the rare occasion when he could be coaxed into speech, the tobacco-stained teeth. I didn't have to look at him for long, as he struggled to stay upright, to know he was not Tomoda. I got to my feet. I had seen enough. "He's not always so quiet," Shigeru said as she showed me to the door. "He can be quite chatty when the mood takes him. He even asks about you sometimes. I'm afraid he's often like this with people he doesn't know well. I'm sorry. And after you've come all this way." "Please, don't mention it. But I'm afraid I have to disappoint you. Your husband is not Tomoda Ginzo. You must have been mistaken when you said you saw some resemblance. I hope you'll take good care of him. He seems awfully frail." A look of disappointment crossed her face as we parted. She stood at the gate as I walked away, following me with her eyes. In the end, seduced by the fine weather, I spent the rest of the day touring the local sights. I continued to Tsukigase, and on the way back stopped in at Igano-Ueno, a small but pleasant town, where I visited the site of Araki Mataemon famous vendetta, and paid my respects at Basho's grave. Later, I admired the bonsai plum trees at Taiseido Inn, where I stayed the night. Wow, that was the shortest chapter yet. That was a wholesome one. That was nice. That was the one showing how beautiful the East is. How peaceful and serene and beautiful. Indicative of things to come for sure. But hello Horo, hello Pluvium. Greetings. I'm not sure. I feel like the last chapter is... Yeah, the last chapter is quite long. I feel like I should start reading it just because I feel like even if I forgot to say hi earlier, feel free to execute me. No, you're fine, don't worry. It's a reading stream. You are perfectly permitted to lurk to your heart's content here. So no, it's all good. Yeah, I feel like if I decided to not read anymore today, I feel like I don't know how fast I read. How much was that? How many pages was that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 3/4, and then the next chapter is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Okay, oh, there we go. Okay, like 19 3/4. Okay, yeah, I should probably continue reading just because I don't think I can read the next chapter in one sitting. I'll just try and have to find a good place to pause, but we can worry about that later. But yeah, I think I'll continue. No, but there's your an overdose of page turning sounds. But alright. We will continue. So if anyone is gonna go get some sleep or anything like that, please do rest well. Obviously on YouTube I cannot raid, I cannot redirect, so you will not be woken up by the end of stream. If you are busy working or studying or anything like that, I do hope it goes well and you manage to get everything done that you want to get done and with minimal stress. And if you're just chilling, then hell yeah. So, we shall continue, and I shall press on my music again just so that it doesn't pause. Love YouTube. Right. Chapter 5. You're a writer, Kay. I'm sure you have all kinds of strange stories locked away inside that head of yours. But the tale I'm about to tell you is so bizarre that I hardly know where to begin, even though it's a story of my own life. By the time I finish, I expect you'll barely be able to believe what you're hearing. Tomada Ginzo paused and downed another glass of cognac. I had run into him earlier that evening at the Café Sans Souci in Kobe. It was June this year, 1925, and this our first meeting since that night at number 27. I was born in the village of Yagyu, in the Soakami district of Yamato province. I come from an old family, with the direct descendants of Matsunaga Hisahide from back in the Middle Ages. My name, as it appears on the family register, is Matsunaga Gisuke. But I know what you're thinking. Who was the Matsunaga Gisuke you met 2 years ago? Patience. All will be revealed. In 1905, when I was 25, I married a young woman by the name of Shigeko. This was no heartwarming story of young romance, by the way. I was just out of university, and getting married was the last thing on my mind. But if you know anything about the way these old families operate, you'll understand the position I was in. I'd been the head of the family since my father died. There was no way they would leave me alone to do as I pleased. Before long, the summons arrived from my mother, ordering me to come home from Tokyo and get ready to welcome Shigeko as my wife. Let's just say the prospect didn't exactly fill me with joy. The thought of spending the rest of my days in the middle of nowhere made me despair. I was a young man bursting with energy. How could I enjoy an empty life like that? I'm a born hedonist, and lazy too. There's nothing I hate more than the idea of honest toil. Anyway, for better or worse, I didn't exactly have to worry about where my next meal was coming from. I spent most of my time daydreaming about escaping to a life of pleasure. Sorry to pause, sorry to pause, sorry to pause, sorry to pause. Die. Okay. I was in love with the city. I never made it as far as Tokyo, but from time to time I did manage to conjure up business that would take me to Kyoto or Osaka. I spent time and money galore in the pleasure quarters of Gion and Shinmachi, but eventually had had enough of geishas and tea houses, and I started to look for other things to do. In those days, though, there wasn't much else. I started to get desperate. But then my mother died. It was as though a burden had been lifted from my shoulders. The worst of my troubles were now over, I thought. At last, I'm free. The family could nag and disapprove all they wanted. But I wasn't afraid any more. I itched to get away, free to go wherever I liked. And once I found a foreign country that suited me, I need never come back to Japan again. I decided to fulfill an old dream and set out for Paris. You know me today as a Japanese man who lives the life of a Westerner, and you know that wine and women mean everything to me. You could say that I've dedicated my life to these two essential items. One problem. I don't like Japanese drink, and I don't like Japanese women. I worship everything about the West. Probably it was my upbringing that was to blame, growing up in that old house in the country. Of course I was going to react against all the suffocating old-fashioned traditions. A friend during my student days in Tokyo was another bad influence. He took me to Yokohama a couple of times, where I entered a dream world that a few Japanese in those days had ever seen. It was my first glimpse into the world of the white man's pleasures. From that moment, I had nothing but contempt for Oriental tastes and traditions. It was all so gloomy, just like that old house in Yagyu. The idea of elegance and restraint disgusted me. It was the exact opposite of everything that was genuine and honest in life, of everything natural and spontaneous. It's not a culture for healthy young people with the energy and drive to make a life for themselves. Doddering old fogies put up with it because they have no choice. They force themselves to find meaning and pleasure in their tedious lives. But really, it's nothing more than a sad and twisted mix of inhibition and self-deceit. Even when he does indulge in pleasure, the Oriental never really lets himself go. It's all so half-hearted. Subtle, they call it. Suggestive, refined. What a load of nonsense. It's a question of aptitude. Orientals just can't deal with the full dose of excitement. They're not up to it physically. Take singing. Here in the East, no one would dream of really opening up and belting out the loudest voice it can produce. It's more refined, you see, to sing in that lonely little whine. And women, when a woman is preparing herself to enter mixed company, does she do whatever she can to make herself attractive? Quite the opposite. She buries whatever charm she might have under several layers of sleeves and sashes. It's supposed to be more alluring that way, you see. Poppycock. The truth is that they don't, because they can't. If they try to hit a high note, all that comes out is a thin falsetto squawk, and that they can't even hold that for long. As for women, the truth is that they don't have much to show off, even if she wanted to. A muddy complexion and no curves at all. That's what I mean. They're just not up to it physically. And there's nothing they can do about it. They have no choice. And so they pretend that their way is more refined. Well, as soon as I realized what was going on, I started to despise the Orient. Their faces disgusted me. My problem, of course, was that I was no better. I had the same complexion myself. Every time I looked in the mirror, I was reminded of my tragedy. Why had I been born into this land of people? And the longer I stayed here, the more like them I seemed to become. I dreamed of leaving this gloomy, lukewarm, spirit-sapping land behind me and escaping to the west, to a land where the voices soar free, singing songs of joy. No more of this stunted culture with its precious talk of elegance and subtlety and restraint. I wanted to be surrounded by people whose bodies looked more beautiful the less was left to the imagination. To the west, where a world existed that was very opposite of the land of subtle hints and things left unsaid. A world of strong colours, poisonous stimulants, and alcohol that scalds the tongue. I longed to reach a place of extreme hedonism, where people push themselves to the very limits in pursuit of pleasure. A world of insatiable desires and unending intoxication. I set my hearts on Paris. I set my sights on Paris, the quintessential heart of the Central West I longed to find. I set off in the summer of 1906, when Shigeko was pregnant with our first child. Secretly, I'd resolved that I would never come back to Japan alive, and I took steps to ensure that the family would be secure after I was gone. I'm sure she suspected the decision I'd made. She must have wept and cursed her luck. She knew now what a heartless man she had married. But she was powerless. She had no choice but to do what I said. To be honest, I did feel a slight twinge of remorse as the day of departure drew near. But all of my doubts disappeared as soon as I boarded the ship. I didn't even have to wait till we got to France. The fun started as soon as we arrived in Shanghai. I fell in love with every port I visited. Forget about Paris, I thought. This is where I want to be. I'll make my home here with these wonderful women by my side. I said the same thing everywhere we stopped. In every city there was a new world waiting for me. Stranger and stranger worlds like nothing I'd ever seen. My infatuation and intoxication grew deeper with every mile we travelled from Japan. When I reached Paris, I threw myself wholeheartedly into a life of decadence. The bashful Oriental mind can hardly imagine the things I found there. Paris was a whirlpool of lust and desire, a dizzying vortex of excess, debauchery, and sick perversions. It was everything I dreamed it would be, a paradise of sensual pleasures. I leapt in headfirst, desperate to be sucked into the whirlpool. I gave myself up to it, body and soul. A true hedonist is quite happy to pay with his life for pleasure. Alcohol, tobacco, gormandizing, and women, a hedonist would happily sacrifice his health and life to satisfy his appetite for these toxic pleasures. I plunged into an ocean of debauchery. I lived in the moment, resigned to the knowledge that each wave of pleasure might be my last. And these premonitions of mortality only made me more reckless. Wine and women were more irresistible than ever, and I dived to the very depths of depravity. Within a year and a half of arriving in Paris, I realized that I'd become completely assimilated. I had become utterly westernized, not just mentally, but physically. Most people who travel to the West experience something similar, I suppose, but I can't believe that many have exhibited symptoms as extreme as mine, and within such a short space of time. My entire physique had changed. At first I hardly noticed, but occasionally I'd run into other Japanese travellers, and none of them would recognize me as a compatriot. Some thought I was Italian, others took me for a Spaniard. The true extent of the change I had undergone hit me when I was drinking with a girlfriend in a cafe one evening. A Japanese man was sitting at the next table, and when I looked closely I realized I knew him. It was my old friend S. We'd been at university together and had been quite close at one age. But he obviously didn't recognize me, even when he looked straight in my face. How odd, I thought. And then it dawned on me. I had changed so much that even my old friends couldn't recognize me. I cannot describe the happiness I felt in that moment. I walked over to his table, looked him in the eye, and spoke to him in French. Even when he heard my voice, he didn't recognize me. I was overjoyed. I raced home, my feet hardly touching the ground. I ran to my rooms and stood before the mirror in raptures, mesmerized by my own reflection. I remembered some photographs I had made just before leaving Japan. I dug them out and compared them with my reflection in the mirror. What a contrast! It was incredible. Face, build, skin color, the expression in the eyes. Was it really possible that a simple change of environment could alter a man so much in just a year and a half? I'd always been thin at home, but I'd started to put on weight as soon as I'd boarded the ship. I'd been drinking night and day throughout the voyage, and by the time I arrived in France my clothes didn't fit me anymore, so I knew I'd put on weight. But I didn't realize until now just how radically this had changed me. It wasn't just that I looked different. As I looked at the photographs and compared them with the figure in the mirror before me, it would have been closer to the truth to say that I'd become someone else entirely. Matsunaga Gisuke, born in the village of Soekami in the province of Yamato, the descendant of Matsunaga Hisahide, was no more. He had vanished from the world and had been replaced by someone else. The man I now saw before me was someone of no discernible race or nationality. You couldn't have said whether he was Japanese, Italian, or Spanish. And this was me. This mysterious man was what I had become. A shiver ran through me. It was like something from one of those strange Western stories about doppelgangers. Except that in my case, I was the one who had turned into someone else. I felt possessed. I looked down at Matsunaga's photograph again. Was this really the man I had been just 18 months ago? It was no surprise my friend hadn't recognized me. I hardly recognized myself. That moment made up my mind. I told myself, I am no longer Matsunaga Gisuke. Who was this man in the photograph? This spindly, gloomy-faced Oriental. I wanted nothing more to do with him. Our relationship is over, I said, and tossed his picture to the floor. A sense of joy welled up in me, like nothing I had ever felt before. I was Japanese no longer. I had been transformed into a Westerner. I was mad with joy. I clapped my hands and stamped my feet. I sang and danced around the room. Images came to me of Japanese food and clothes and customs. But they came to me not as memories of things I had experienced myself. They were like scraps of information I'd picked up about the lives of a faraway people. To get there, you'd have to travel down the Marseilles and board a ship for the east. Eastward and eastward you'd sail, crossing the seas for 6 weeks or more before you finally reached a small island country called Japan, where the people have...
Okay, I need to stop for a moment. Sorry. Here's a thing, and I've been trying to skip over all these little mentions. I know that this book is written by a Japanese person, and so it's from a Japanese perspective, but he keeps on. I mean, number one, the word orient itself, and oriental, I feel are kind of not words that I'm supposed to use. But more specifically, the things that I'm really skipping over, because I really feel like do not want to say, is the skin color, but it's getting it. Why? I know this book was written in 1920 something, and so I guess it does. Definitely clipping all of these mentions out. No, please don't. Posting them on Twitter. Pain. But yeah, it's definitely a book of its time. And for that reason, I am struggling a little bit. Prostitution aside, it's rough. It's difficult reading. Okay, I'm gonna carry on. I'm gonna hope that he shuts up. But yeah, please understand the context of these things being said, and the fact that this was a book written by a Japanese man. So, yeah. Okay. With that little disclaimer out of the way, and me feeling less like spinny eye emoji. Okay. Live in dark, gloomy houses. They speak in tiny, mumbling voices, and in the morning they sip miso soup out of wooden bowls coated in black lacquer. What a dank, colourless existence. They don't even have any furniture in these shadowy houses. No beds, no chairs, nothing. They spend their lives down on the floor, crouching under low ceilings and sitting on their heels. Just imagining it made me feel claustrophobic. How suffocating. If the person I was now, I went by the name of Jax Morin since leaving Matsunaga behind forever. If I had been dropped down into that world and forced to live like that again, I don't think I would have survived a single day. I know what you're thinking. What am I doing in Japan now? Why didn't I live out the rest of my days in Europe? You might well ask. The devil was toying with me again. As I told you, I was in love with Paris and the life I had there. It was a life of perfect indulgence, one pleasure after another, day after day after day. I had no intention of coming back. I expected to die there when the time came, and I kept getting fatter. At my peak I weighed nearly 170 pounds. My skin got whiter all the time, the redness in my cheeks more and more pronounced. I was aglow with health. I had resolved to stay in Paris if it killed me. But, in fact, my new lifestyle seemed to be doing me no harm at all. I plunged deeper into the world of the senses, determined to drain the cup of pleasure to the last dregs. No matter how deeply I drank, it was never enough. If a man wants to be fit and healthy, all he needs to do is live life the way they do in the West. Live life to the full. Your appetites are there to be satisfied. Have your fill, whether it's food or women you hunger for. The self-effacing Oriental philosophy of restraint just makes people weak. I was the living proof. Since I'd become westernized and booked up, I'd become the picture of health and vitality. And it wasn't clean living and a healthy diet that did it, that's for sure. It didn't seem to matter how I neglected my health. I got bigger all the time. What better evidence could there be for the benefits of positive living than the fine physique I had developed since I came to Europe? I was convinced I had made the right decision. I became reckless. How wonderful life was back then. A pleasant climate, wonderful food, and not a care in the world. I enjoyed a string of successful love affairs. If I gambled, I won. I was sailing on an ocean of happiness with the wind set fair behind me. All I had to do was sit back and let the breezes blow me from one happy day to the next. And I still had plenty of money. And even if I somehow managed to spend it all, there were plenty of ways for me to make a living, so long as I wasn't too proud to lower myself a little. This was Paris. Anyone can live pretty well in Paris. And if it didn't work out, I was ready to die by the roadside. So there I was, optimistic and carefree and ready for whatever the future might hold. Or so I thought. That's when things started to go wrong. Just when I thought nothing could harm me, up jumped the devil and turned everything upside down. It was a beautiful day when it happened. A bit like one of those days you sometimes get in Japan, as summertime fades into autumn. I was out for an afternoon stroll along one of the boulevards. Everything was perfect, and I stopped for a moment to enjoy the view. I stood and I looked up through the branches of the plane trees and into the clear blue sky. And in that instant, and why, I've never known, I lost my balance. I started to shake. My vision blurred. I saw spots dancing across the sky. Then everything went dark and I almost fell over backwards. It ended in an instant, and before I had time to realize what was happening, I was back to normal again. I went on my way and forgot all about it, until it happened again, and again. It was the same every time. I'd look up at something and suddenly my vision would swim. I became dizzy. I'd feel a sharp, heavy tug at my neck, as if a lead weight had attached to the back of my head, pulling me backwards. Over time it got worse. After a while, it didn't just happen when I looked up anymore, but sometimes when I looked down. One time I dropped a glove in the street. I bent down to pick it up and felt all the blood in my body rush to my head. The veins in my neck bulged and my whole face turned bright red like a boiled octopus. I could feel myself losing consciousness. Any moment I was going to fall flat on my face. What the hell was happening? It was terrifying. I had no idea what was wrong. I tried to shrug it off and waited for it to pass. The occasional dizzy spell is nothing to worry about, I told myself. Anyone could have them. But it was no use. Soon it was happening every time I washed my hair or bent down to tie my shoelaces. The worst time was when I was eating a bowl of hot soup in a restaurant one day. It happened suddenly, as always. One moment everything was normal, the next I was in the throes of an attack. My face turned red and I could feel myself about to pass out. I thought I was going to collapse into my soup. Luckily, I managed to pull myself back just in time. I came back to my senses as my nose was about to hit the soup. But it was a shock. And maybe the soup was too hot. But if I was going to have an attack every time I bent my head to eat, I was going to have to be more careful where I took my meals from now on. Was I having a breakdown? Or was some horrible virus wreaking havoc with my brain? It was strange, but now I started to hear the voice of cowardice whispering in my ear. I had made up my mind to die here if need be, and as far as I was concerned, nothing had changed. But these dizzy spells terrified me. My heart started racing, and I felt as though I was about to lose control completely. Cowardice creeps upon you. It eats away at your soul before you know what was happening. And when it strikes, it's irresistible. You might think you're ready to die, but there's no defending yourself against an attack of cowardice. I don't mind dying is not the same as I am not afraid of death. The two conditions are perfectly compatible. You might not mind the idea of dying, but the fear remains. I found myself trembling at the slightest thing. What was wrong with me? I told myself I didn't mind dying, but now I was scared at my wits by a little thing like this? But it didn't make any difference how I reasoned with myself. Suddenly, without warning, my whole body would start to shake and tremble. The colour drained from my face. I looked like clay. I was drenched in a cold sweat, unsteady on my feet. Sometimes it happened in the streets, in a crowd of people. All I could do was escape as quickly as possible. I'd make a mad dash for it, scampering home wildly like some lunatic, tugging out my hair in clumps. If it happened at home, I'd pound my feet against the floorboards and throw myself against the doors and walls. I'd pick things up and hurl them across the room. Eventually I would dash to the washstand and douse myself with cold water. The palpitations grew worse and worse. My chest pounded as though my heart were going to explode. The attacks never lasted more than a few minutes, and after a few shots of brandy I usually felt more or less normal again. But I never knew when the next attack was coming. I lived in fear, a bottle of brandy constantly at my side. At first, these foolish attacks only happened when I was alone. So long as no one noticed anything, it was easy enough to deal with the effects. But before long this changed too. In those days, I was obsessed with a young chorus girl called Suzanne. We met as often as we could, and spent most of our nights and days together. And then, one evening, it happened. We met in our usual place, and were sitting back, exchanging sweet nothings on a chaise lounge. Now, this Suzanne had pure skin as white as alabaster, and as I lay there admiring the arm in front of me, I was struck again by how beautiful she was. I'd spent many a happy hour in rapt contemplation of her skin before, but that night, for some reason, I was more bewitched than ever. I was transfixed by her pure white arm. I allowed my eyes to move slowly up her arm to her shoulders. Ah, her shoulders! They were like nothing I'd ever seen. Pale, shimmering perfection, even more sublime than her arms. I felt a shudder run through me. Every hair on my body stood on end. As the dazzle of her white skin flashed upon my optic nerve, I felt the world start to spin. I felt dizzy, and there was a cold stabbing in my chest. Suddenly, my sense of awe, how white her skin, how perfect, turned to fear. My legs shook, as if I had made a mistake of looking down from the top of a cliff into the gaping abyss below. I know it sounds ridiculous to talk about a woman's pale skin as something terrifying, but it was so beautiful, and it belonged to the woman I loved more than anything else in the world. This was enough to set anyone's heart hammering. "What's wrong? You're so pale," Suzanne said in a voice of tender concern. She slid over beside me. As she moved closer, her white skin loomed before my eyes. My terror reached a climax. I thrust away her hand and dashed to the washstand to throw cold water over my head. "Suzanne, brandy, quickly!" And that's the last I remember. One moment I was screaming for brandy, and the next I was out. It pains me to think about it even now. To be blessed with such a wonderful woman, and to be rendered incapable of enjoying the act of love with her. I fled her embrace and trudged back to my lodgings alone, cursing myself. The first thing I had to do was get through the following evening. We had an arrangement to meet again, and I knew that any repetition of tonight's performance would mean the end. The best thing I could do was finish off the relationship myself as painlessly as possible. Not that I had tired of her. I knew she would be waiting for me, and could barely stop myself from rushing to see her right away. As soon as my attack had passed, her pure white skin, which had inspired such horror and revulsion the night before, once again took on the air of something magical. How could I have contemplated separating from such a wonderful woman? I was more in love with her than ever. I plucked up my courage and set out for her house, a prayer in my heart all the way. We managed to meet again several times this way, but I suffered at least a mild attack almost every time. To make matters worse, it wasn't just her skin that set me off anymore. Anything could act as a trigger. Once my excitement reached a certain pitch, it was all over. I'd drive myself on, and then, suddenly, a valley of fear would open up and I'd come thudding down with a crash. When her burning lips drew close to mine, when she wrapped her arms around me as if she meant to never let me go, when we lay giggling and tickling in innocent play, my attacks always came at the worst possible moments. The greater the pleasure on offer, the worse the fear became. It were as if it were determined to shatter our happiness into pieces. Even when I didn't have an attack, the terrifying thought that it might happen again stopped me from enjoying myself. Here I was, a dedicated hedonist pledged to enjoy life to the full. Look at the state I was in. I lost the ability to practice my faith. Listen, Kay. Try to understand. Can you imagine the anguish I was facing every day? My life was a misery. The skies over Paris were as clear as ever. The sun still shone, and there were more beautiful women on the streets than you could count. But none of it brought me pleasure anymore. It was torture. If I looked up at the sky, my head spun. Go out in the sunshine and the blood would rush to my head. The sight of white skin terrified me. I was inconsolable. My eyes were so bad now that I couldn't stand the sunlight. I took to hiding like a mole in my gloomy room where no sunlight could penetrate. And then, one day, an image came to my mind of another room I'd once known. A room just as dark as this one, but somehow gentler, less oppressive. I remembered the old house back in Yamato. It was only a few years since I left, but my memories seemed to come from the ancient past. I remembered the old life I'd led in that house for the first 2 decades of my life. The custom we kept up even now of lighting old-fashioned lanterns when we went to bed, the dreamy flickering light they made by your pillow, the smoke-blackened ceilings and the main pillar of the dark bedroom, my wife's peaceful face in the shadowy lamplight, wrapped under the bedclothes and dropping off to sleep. What was I doing, thinking nostalgically of Japan like this? I tried to drive the thoughts from my mind, but the harder I tried, the more insistently the memories came back. I was overcome with sentimentality, an indescribable longing for the past. And it wasn't just the old village. I thought back on the times I'd spent in the pleasure quarters, memories of Gion and Shinmachi, the evocative twang of the shimasen, the delicate lyrical songs sung with refinement and restraint. Everything I had once rejected, everything I had dismissed as self-serving lies and deceit. But now I discovered with a jolt that the memory of these things had a strange power to calm my ravaged nerves. But that wasn't the worst of it. I started to feel that the white skin lacked something, a gentleness and sweetness and wholehearted sympathy I knew that I could only find in a woman. This author is killing me. Okay. Sorry. I imagined the taste of miso soup in the morning, pickles and rice, soup made from kelp stock, and raw sea bream arranged neatly on a tray. The simplicity and balance of the colours. I dreamed of the clean taste of Japanese food. I cursed myself as I did it. What was I thinking? Longing for Japan shamelessly like a lovesick fool. What had happened to my pride? But it was no use. I couldn't stop the thoughts in my head. It was the same everywhere I looked. The tastes and fashions of the West seemed loud and vulgar to me now, shallow and without substance. I heard a voice constantly in my ear. You are Japanese. You'll never belong here. You can never become fully westernized. It followed me everywhere I went. 3 times a day when I sat down to my meals, I would hear it taunting me again. Give it up, it would say. You're not fooling anyone. You don't really think this stuff tastes good. You don't really like drinking all these glittering glasses and cutting up your food with metal prongs and saws. Look at that tablecloth and those porcelain plates. Oh, it's all very neat and hygienic, I suppose. But it's not very subtle, is it? Where's the depth to it? Wouldn't you rather eat with chopsticks from a set of lacquered bowls? Wouldn't that agree with you better? Don't you think it's slightly barbaric to hack at food with a knife and fork like this? It's close to the way animals eat. On and on it went, trying to tempt me back to my old ways. If I went to the opera, my evening would be ruined by a voice in my head that gave me no peace. Oh, please, this is too much. I don't care how hard you try to pretend to appreciate European music. I refuse to believe you enjoyed this noise. You might fool everyone else, but you'll never fool me. The voice never let up. It ridiculed me wherever I went. Listen to them yelping up there, those sopranos and baritones you claim to find so wonderful. No more of this nonsense about voice production and timbre. They sound like animals in pain. That ringing in your ears every time they hit a high note, that's your eardrum about to burst. Don't try to pretend. I know you're longing for the sweet songs of home. Those gentle songs are what will always be true music to your ears. The constant chattering grew more and more insistent, until it wasn't a whisper anymore, and I could hear it as clearly as I could hear my own voice. Look, it said, I'm telling you this for your own good. You've got to get out of here now. Go home to Japan. Too much brightness, too much whiteness. Of course it's going to make you feel queasy after a while. It's in your blood. You're Japanese. Living in the midst of this glare for so long is enough to give anyone a breakdown. It's no use trying to force yourself to love white women. It's just not in you. Your constitution won't allow it. I did everything I could to resist the voice, but I could do nothing about the fear that gripped me tighter each day that passed. By now, every aspect of my life in the West revolted me. I shuddered every time I had to walk past a high-rise building, or get in a lift, or drive in a car at high speed. The squeak of the solid floorboards under my feet, the pounding of the pavements. I was sick of being boxed in by covered-up walls in rooms with no natural wood. And the odours, the makeup, the perfume, the clothes, the food, the peculiar smell of the white race that seeped up into everything. The merest whiff of it was enough to make me gag. All right, the voice said. Enough. This country isn't the place for you, alive or dead. Just get on the ship. You'll start to feel better as soon as you leave these streets behind. Get on that ship and your fits and palpitations will melt away. You think I'm trying to trick you? Try it and see. I could feel temptation tugging at my sleeve. Part of me was still appalled by the idea of going back. but all the time I could hear a voice pushing me forward and urging me back home. Get out of here. Run away. Quick. And I'm gonna pause there. There's a few more pages to go. But I'm gonna pause before he comes back to Japan.
Jesus Christ. See, I've actually made this mistake once before with a book. I was reading... Actually, I have it here. No, I don't. No, I don't. I have a compilation of stories written by, I think his name is Ken Liu. And he is a, he as an author, his father is American and his mother is Chinese, and he was born in America and raised in America. I remember the Paper Tiger book. Yeah. The reason I had to stop reading the Paper Tiger book was because it got very it felt wrong for me to read out loud. Like, I'm fine with reading stuff that is self-deprecating towards, you know, the British. That's fine, because that's my place to do so. I can do that. I could be like, wow, fucking Brits. But it's not really my place to read out the words of somebody that's everybody's place. That's true, except the French. Real. Just me reading that, I had no problem insulting Paris. Ugh, disgusting. But yeah, I have a hard time. I know it was written by someone who you know can say those things, but to read them out myself just doesn't sit right with me. And that happened in the Paper Tiger when the perspective, like he says things like he starts talking like I don't want to be Chinese anymore. I don't want anything to do with this. I don't want to be called like these he says like the slurs, and I'm just there like, yeah, I can't do this. I can't do this. This is the same problem I'm having here. Well, either way, we will finish this particular short story next week, and then we're gonna head back to the British short story, where I can be like, yeah, fuck these Brits, am I right? Good grief. It is interesting though. I guess like these books, I mean not the Paper Tiger, but the story of Tomoda and Matsunaga, they are a product of their time. I mean, let's have a look. Find a short story. It says most vile things about the British possible as penance. Alright, let me go on Tumblr real quick. I don't know any off the top of my head that are very insulting to the British. Yeah, here we go. Here we go. Tanizaki Junchiro. It was written in 1926. It depicts an individual whose personality is split between East and West. Apparently it was quite a political piece, because it got published
in the year that the emperor died, and things in Japan started to take a turn more for the West. Although, as we all know, really the westernization of Japan didn't really super hit hard until 1945. Thanks, America. Need to brush up on my anti-British literature. Yeah, I don't know much anti-British literature. Maybe Lord of the Flies. Lord of the Flies is like, hey, yeah, British schoolboys, scum of the earth, real. You're welcome. God damn it. Yeah, Lord of the Flies is wow, look how awful these British schoolboys are, and they really are like that. They really are just like that. I got hold for review. Let me let that through. British pissed off enough people. Yeah, it definitely exists. It definitely is out there. Maybe the best place to look would perhaps be Indian literature. I don't know how much Indian literature has been translated to English though. I'd be curious, but I feel like you'd get quite a lot of anti-British sentiment in that. And probably a lot of other places, to be honest. Wow, Brits, am I right? But yeah. Actually, I want to. Do I have? No, I don't have the Penguin book of British short stories on my desk right now, so I can't look. Gandhi's Hidden Dish. Real? I don't know. He might have one. All right, but yeah. Book aside. It's still an interesting read. I think the story of Tomoda Matsunaga, it's definitely interesting to see the way that they view well, the views at the time. 1926, I believe that is after World War One, I wanna say. Maybe just after World War One, or maybe during World War One. God, my history. I think it's after. I think World War One was like 1916, but I don't really remember Japan having a part in World War One. They probably did. Thought World War One ended in 1916. Yeah. So yeah, it was written a few years after World War One. They did. Yeah, wait, hold on, didn't they... no, my history for World War... World War One was in England, actually is not really taught as much as World War Two. On the Allied side, yeah, I thought I did remember that they were... Because they got a place on, they got a place in the United Nations, didn't they? And then they got kicked off because during World War Two they were like, hey, we wanna League of Nations. Yeah, that's it. Not United. United Nations, the modern one. They were integrated with British forces, if I recall, or something like that. Yeah, World War One, honestly, in Britain, the majority of my knowledge from school was really about the trenches. It was really about like the war front between well, in France and Germany. World War Two was very much the more of a focus in my curriculum. Wonder why. I actually don't know the reason why there was more of a focus on that.
Although at the same time, it's always like the curriculum is something that's like decided by like an exam board. And so it's not actually about teaching you what's important, it's just kind of about teaching you something to pass an exam. So you really do have to kind of study these things on your own if you actually want to make any decent knowledge about anything. Honestly. Anyway, I have gone on for a little bit longer than usual. I feel like I always end up going down a rabbit hole after these streams. Although, I guess the thing is about my YouTube streams, I find it a little bit easier to keep a train of thought here. I guess because it's quieter. Maybe? I'm not sure. Because I want hello Frederick. Hello. I guess because like on Twitch I read every message everywhere. Or at least I try my best to. I feel like it always ends up going a bit faster than I can actually get my thoughts out. YouTube streams are cozy, Twitch streams feel zoomer no matter how much you do. Yeah, I am cozy streamer, but Twitch does still have like a certain level of speed and stuff that I am maybe not accustomed. Like I'm not accustomed. No, I am accustomed to it. I am accustomed to Twitch. Maybe I'm just not built for it. Maybe I'm just not built for Twitch. But it's fine. I will continue. I will continue to do my best. I want to do more stuff here. It looks like from the poll that I ran that I'll be playing Okami here first. I don't know how long of a game. I hate it. I'm sorry that your anti Okami did not work. I promise we will play the other games as well. It's just Okami has been voted as first. But yeah, so Okami will be played here on YouTube. So I'll be kind of curious to see how a gameplay stream on Twitch compares to a gameplay stream on YouTube. I am curious. I have a feeling it's going to be a bit calmer. That's probably for the best for me. Pretty doggo game reel. But yeah, I still need to work out a day that I'm gonna do it. I think you guys for being in my super exclusive YouTube stream, you guys get to a little bit of my thoughts about the future. So after I come back from my Christmas break, I'm thinking about making a few changes in my schedule. So I'm gonna try and work out a day for the YouTube streams, which might end up being one of the days that's already one of my existing Twitch days. I think the only thing that's for certain is that I'm not going to stream on a Saturday night, just because I feel like that's, well, I know I asked you guys before like which day's best, but also I feel like Saturday night is kind of a very busy night for streams. I feel like a lot of people stream on a Saturday. So, but yeah, I'm gonna rethink about my schedule and stuff like that, and think about if I want to move stuff around, because before the current schedule, I actually used to have 2 nights that I had a stream that started at 8. I had my Thursday stream started at 8, and then I had a Friday stream that also started at 8. Everyone must be busy on a Saturday. Everyone everyone's out living. Well, they're Western, right? I'm a Western VTuber, So everyone must be being indulgent and drinking and partying or something. But yeah, I'm gonna think about things. I would one day I would like to actually do an afternoon stream. You know, something EU bros, EU bros. Are they real? I don't know. But my sleep is actually kind of worse than ever, so unlikely. But I've been thinking about like stuff I want to do in the next year. Something New Year resolutions, something. And I wanna stream more again. As after I became corporation, when I took on that role, I cut down a lot of my hours. And while I have brought some of them back, I never really got back to the amount of streaming I used to do. When I got my streamer feedback, and it told me like how many hours I'd streamed and stuff, I just kind of sat there like, haven't streamed as much as I really wanted to. But it's fine. In the future, it's going to be hard to tell because my stream stuff is going to be split between YouTube and Twitch. And I feel like not being able to see the numbers and stuff is actually going to be better for me. Numbers bad. Practicing holding hands with other VTubers and other I would not hold a hand with a V. I provide head pats for other VTubers. Hand holding, 2D gen. Unbelievable. No. Nope. Hand holding is viewer only, based. Yeah. Real. This is a viewer love zone. Alright. Anyway, with the end of my very last playlist song coming to an end, that is a sign that I have definitely gone on for too long. So, viewer good, VTuber bad. I just think... Do I go on another tangent? I'll try and word this as short as possible, even if misunderstandings can come from a incomplete explanation of my feelings. I don't think it is the worst thing you can do to be a streamer, to make friends with streamers. But I think it is bad. I think it is disrespectful to viewers to only stream because you want to be friends with VTubers. I think it is disrespectful to the viewers who literally spend hours of their day potentially spending time with you. Yeah. I think that's the most reasonable I can word it as. Tangent purity is one of my favorites. The spitting facts. I just I don't have anything against people. I don't have anything against people who want to make friends through VTubing with other VTubers, but I think it's disrespectful. I think if you want to make friends with through VTubing, why are you only saying you want to be friends with other VTubers? It doesn't make sense. Someone is not better than someone just because they have an anime avatar, okay? It's not how it works. Okay, right. Tangent aside, I am actually going to finish stream now. So, please take care.
get something to eat, get something to drink, and get some rest. And how do I express agreement? I'm too Twitch brained. Just you can just say nodders. I guess it makes sense. I'm also Twitch brained, so I understand. But yeah, if anyone needs to get some sleep, please do. If you're still working, if you're still studying, anything like that, I do hope it goes well and you get everything done. But I will be back on Sunday on Twitch with some Dwarf Fortress. So hopefully I'll see you there, and if I don't, then please do take care. Good night, Onyasumi. Good night. Dwarf Fort real? Dwarf Fort real.